MSW Media.
Season 4 of How We Win is here.
For the past 4 years, we've been making history in critical elections all over the country. And last year, we made history again by expanding our majority in the Senate, beating election-denying Republicans in crucial state house races, and fighting back a non-existent red wave.
But the MAGA Republicans who plotted and pardoned the attempted overthrow of our government now control the House, thanks to gerrymandered maps and repressive anti-voter laws. And the chaotic spectacle we've already seen shows us just how far they will go to seize power, dismantle our government, and take away our freedoms.
So, the official podcast of The Persistence is back with Season 4. There's so much more important work ahead of us to fight for equity, justice, and our very democracy itself. We'll take you behind the lines and inside the rooms where it happens with strategy and inspiration from progressive changemakers all over the country.
And we'll dig deep into the weekly news that matters most and what you can do about it with messaging and communications expert, co-founder of Way to Win, and our new co-host, Jennifer Fernandez Ancona.
So join Steve and I every Wednesday for your weekly dose of inspiration, action, and hope.
I'm Steve Pearson.
And I'm Jennifer Fernandez Ancona.
And this is How We Win.
The rule of law is not just some lawyer's turn of phrase. It is the very foundation of our democracy. The essence of the rule of law is that like cases are treated alike. That there not be one rule for Democrats and another for Republicans, one rule for the powerful, another for the powerless, one rule for the rich and another for the poor, or different rules depending upon one's race or ethnicity. To serve as Attorney General at this critical time is a calling I am honored and eager to answer.
So now it's cleanup on aisle 45 time. And for a long while yet, it is going to be cleanup on aisle 45.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 9 of Cleanup on Aisle 45. I am AG.
And I'm Andrew Torres.
And I wanted to kick off, Andrew, if it was okay, by thanking some of our new patrons this week.
Absolutely.
All right. First, we have Bridget Eileen Madden, Christina Perry, Bonnie Solmson, Chris Waltrip. I remember Chris. William Lancashire, Ratho, very cool name. Danielle Segal, Pat Stubbs, B. Fred, Your Name Here, and New Girl 17. Is your name here a person, or is that just something I'm saying? Like your name could be here too.
It's possible that a one of those auto billboards has decided to start patronizing the show. But if you would like your name here, you can head on over to patreon.com/aisle45pod and sign up. Give us as little as $1, and we will read all new patrons going forward. So good way to get a little shout out. And I have to say, we are also super excited. We're sort of looking for look, patrons get a ton of great stuff. They get the show ad free. They get our interaction in the Patreon community. They get all of our special episodes that we've done so far. But we're really looking for a way to give a special shout out, to do something unique for our $2 and up patrons. And so here's something we're going to try, and that is, can you beat AG and Andrew at trivia? And I can't wait for this. AG, you set this up. You want to talk a little bit about how this is going to work?
Yeah, we're going to do it on Zoom. It's for our $2 and up patrons. And our friend Dallas McLaughlin is going to host, and you're going to create, we'll put a post on Patreon. You're going to get 5 people together for your trivia team. You're going to come up with a name for your trivia team, and you're going to reply to that post with the name of your team and your members. And then, you guys have to set up a way to communicate outside of Zoom, whether it's a Facebook Messenger group text or whether it's a phone group text or whether you want to do it on Twitter DM room or a conference call, however you want to communicate with each other. And then Dallas will ask us questions. Andrew and I will be on a team. There's only 2 of us on our team. So you have a decided advantage by being able to have up to 5 people on your team. There's going to be a limited number of slots. So look for that post. When are we going to put that post up? It should be up now, right, Andrew?
Oh, yeah. That'll be up before you hear this show.
Great. And it's just going to be super fun. It's going to take about anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour to complete the game. And come up with, the trivia team name, I think, is the ultimate thing. If you've ever played pub trivia or live trivia, the team name is really where it's at. And so think long and hard about that. We're probably going to have a special round of trivia there's usually about 5 rounds during the game. We'll probably have a special 80s pop culture movie reference round, just so that we can be ringers for that. But it's going to be a lot of fun, and I hope you'll join us.
Yeah, absolutely. I am really, really looking forward to it. All right. So with that out of the way, thanks again to everybody who supported the show, continuing to support the show. I think we've got some news to dive into.
Yeah, we've got a lot of cleanup going on, aside from the fact that Deb Haaland was just confirmed as Interior Secretary, and Joe Biden has sent the names of his 3 nominees for the U.S. Postal Service Board of Governors to the Senate for confirmation. So that's where that is, in case anybody's wondering, because we're just trying to clean up DeJoy at this point. But for a long time during the Trump administration, we've been asking, CDC, are you okay? From mealy-mouthed and whitewashed investigative reports filed about COVID conditions in meatpacking plants to the blatant downplay of the severity of the virus and the pandemic from the beginning, there were a lot of sketchy things going on at the CDC, not to mention Caputo being named the Public Relation and Communications Chief for HHS, which was what?
And so now federal health officials in Biden's CDC have identified several controversial pandemic recommendations that have been released during the, that other guy's administration that they say were, quote, not primarily authored by the staff, and this will maybe not shock you, don't reflect the best available scientific evidence.
No.
Yeah. So the review identified 3 documents that had already been removed from the agency's website. One of them, released in July, delivered a pretty compelling case for school reopenings and, in order to get there, downplayed the health risks. New CDC Director Dr. Rochelle Walensky said that the document was controversial because it was released weeks after Trump criticized the agency's earlier recommendations as being, quote, and I'm not going to do a Trump voice, very tough and expensive, but it's not hard to hear that in the back of your head. Not having to hear Trump's voice has been one of the 3 greatest accomplishments of the Biden administration. So, anyway, so that document had this big opening preamble, right? Fact-finding that extolled the importance of in-school classes that was presented as if it was a CDC document, but the agency was, and I know this will shock you, not part of the discussion or drafting. That guidance was later removed in October. Walensky said, "This is something I will not allow as CDC director. The processes we have in place moving forward will ensure that this cannot and will not occur."
Yeah, and a second set of guidelines that they removed about the country's reopening, they were released in April by the White House, and it was far less detailed than what had been drafted by the CDC and FEMA.
Yep.
And a third guidance issued in August discouraging testing of people without symptoms, even when they had contact with infected individuals. That was replaced in September after experts and scientists and people with brains inside and outside the agency raised alarms. So This is interesting. Andrew, who ordered this review?
Okay, so the review was ordered by Walensky as part of her pledge to restore trust in the agency, right? As a cleanup on aisle 45 that she called in, right? And look, again, remember, in these executive agencies, you have career professionals, and they're looking around. They are seeing that they are doing their best to be a part of the process, but their recommendations and reports kept getting watered down by the Trump administration because, we had to politicize the pandemic. So according to a memo from the agency's current principal deputy director, that's Ann Schuchat, the review was done to ensure that all CDC recommendations are evidence-based and free of politics. Her memo does not identify who wrote the 3 Trump guidances, but the review confirms what was rather obvious to you and I and most of us all along, that Trump political hacks ordered revisions to critical guidance in order to fit their narrative, whatever it was at the time.
Yeah, that whole downplaying, right? And in addition to the 3 documents not written by CDC staff, the review also cited recommendations that should have used stronger language. It's too strict, too expensive. They should have used stronger language and should have cited supporting scientific briefs, just some citations of science. The memo also says too often it was difficult to decipher the core recommendations in long guidance documents, and the crux of what was new or changed was difficult to find. Another example here, the review board found instances in which guidance used weaker language, such as considerations and if feasible, even though evidence supported stronger recommendations. These came out of some of those meat packing plant investigations, like have your employees wear masks, but they put have employees wear masks where feasible. I know Maddow did a whole side-by-side comparison of one of these reports, of the original report written by the scientists and the mealy-mouthed one that came out later from who knows who wrote the report, who revised the report. But, they just side by side, the language was just watered down.
Yeah. And so officials have now released or updated more than a dozen major guidances, including 8 since January 20th alone, which is when Walensky became director of the CDC. Also a pretty important date in human history, right? Those updating documents include recommendations for wearing masks that fit properly, including double masking, and of course, that's. I guess we don't have time to go down the rabbit trail of, first you said 1 mask, then you said 2 masks, getting through to those folks. But right. Yeah. Because you watered it down in the first place. We had to come back with appropriate guidance for people who, didn't think it needed to go over their nose. Anyway, rant over. A roadmap really for how to safely open schools, right? Like this is one of the weird ones that has been politicized, right? Because both political parties want to reopen our schools. Democrats want to fund reopening schools and create guidance so that we can do so without, killing a whole bunch of kids. And then finally, guidelines for fully vaccinated people. That's a thing that a lot of people don't understand, in terms of multiple strains of the virus, continued additional risk. And, as we cycle through that process, that's going to continue to be really, really important. So good work by Walensky.
Yeah, and the school thing, every single Republican voted against funding schools so that they can have the proper ventilation and things that they need to safely reopen. A bunch of Republicans are coming out saying, "Oh, Biden broke a promise. Schools aren't reopened." And he said in his first 100 days. So let's wait till we get to at least day 100. Before we start. I mean, math is hard, to be fair. And
look, like, I would rather, right? If on day 100, Joe Biden says, look, it's way worse than we thought. All of our teachers aren't vaccinated, and this would be a potential disease vector. So, it's going to take us X more days to reopen schools. Like, that's not breaking a promise. That's called smart leadership.
Yeah, and when you have governors like Abbott and Reeves, and just fully reopening their states and causing spikes, and then they're going to be like, "Oh, Biden didn't reopen the schools in Texas like he promised." That's just going to be those are going to be the talking points. You know what I mean? It's
Yep. Absolutely.
Very, very frustrating, but a lot of good work being done at the CDC. The CDC is okay, and I'm very happy about that. We aren't going to see any more of these watered down reports. We're going to see actual recommendations with teeth and a little bit of, verve. instead of hey, your meat packing plant there in South Dakota is the biggest outbreak in the universe. But wear masks only if feasible. And don't wash your hands when you can. Stagger shifts if it's okay. Just absolutely terrible reports just to align with the political views of the former guy who has been downplaying this pandemic since the beginning. Remember those Woodward tapes?
And this is really a roadmap for other executive agencies, right? To look, I don't care. I'm not interested in a witch hunt to root out everybody who was responsible for watering down the reports. But here's what I do know, right? Prior versions of documents get circulated and saved. They're in email files. And so I sincerely hope that other Biden appointees are issuing similar directives to say, okay, look, is there a way to determine if there are things that are fouling up our process, right? That have been historical roadblocks where we make recommendations and they get overridden politically. And so, this really does provide a good template for something that Biden has said since his campaign days, which is replacing political determinations with science, evidence, and fact-based ones. And everybody ought to be behind that.
Yeah, and we're going to be seeing this a lot in the coming years of revisions and cleanup on L45. We've got a lot more show to get to, everybody, so stick around. We'll be right back after this quick break. Hey, everybody, it's AG for Cleanup on Aisle 45. Do you ever listen to Andrew and I talk and you want to interject? You have something to say. You have an opinion. Well, now you can interject those opinions and ask us questions because we go live on the Stereo app where you can ask us questions directly. Join us for the Cleanup on Aisle 45 after party Q&A for uncensored opinions and exclusive content only available on our Stereo app shows. I love the Stereo app. I'm there all the time. And you can follow me and get notified every time I go live. I'm at Allison Gill. Or you can follow Andrew at Torres. We take a deep dive into a variety of topics, and we interact directly with listeners. So download the Stereo app, go to stereo.com/Allison Gill, and there's a link in the description too, and you can join us over there. Stereo app has thousands of live social conversations on a wide range of genres and interests, including us, our legal news stuff and politics, comedy, sports, anything you want, and more. And you can choose whether to be a co-host, participate as a guest, or just listen in on exclusive conversations. So we'll see you for the Cleanup on Aisle 45 after party every Tuesday at 5 Pacific, 8 Eastern.
AG, as a lead-in to our fantastic interview with Adam Fernandez about Vanita Gupta, which is President Biden's nominee for Associate Attorney General, I thought we'd look at some of the things that the acting Associate Attorney General and the DOJ in general have been up to over the past week. First, to start off, I was a little moved by this, but, Merrick Garland finally got to address the troops last Thursday after his confirmation by, again, 70-30.
Yeah, hit that nail on the head, didn't I? It was wonderful to see, too. He pulled up in the SUV, got out. All of there was a large number of Department of Justice employees out there to welcome him, applauding him. It was nice to watch, and it was really interesting. By the way, it reiterated his statement to the Department of Justice employees. Reiterated some of the remarks from Garland's nomination speech that we recognize in our intro music, including rather pointedly noting that justice requires that there not be one rule for Democrats and another for Republicans. And right before that, Merrick Garland specifically called out that the only way to retain the trust of the American people is to adhere to the norms. that have been part of the Department of Justice since, and this struck me as intentional, Edward Levy's stint as the first post-Watergate Attorney General. He brought that name up in his confirmation hearing, his initial remarks, his remarks to the troops. When we say troops, we mean Department of Justice employees. Edward Levy's stint as the first post-Watergate Attorney General. What are your thoughts on that?
So if you're looking for an indication that Merrick Garland, perhaps as one of his top 3 agenda items to investigate and maybe prosecute Trump-era corruption, that's not a bad tea leaf to be reading.
No, exactly. And I think it's also no surprise that he went straight to work. The very first thing Garland was briefed on after he was sworn in, signed his little paper, on day one was the insurrection, which continues to suggest this is Department of Justice's top priority, Merrick Garland's top priority. Over the weekend, we received reports that Julian Cater and George Tanios had been arrested in connection with the death of Officer Brian Sicknick. Remember, they arrested that one guy who had bear spray, but we weren't sure if it was in connection with them closing in on, because we had gotten that report that the Department of Justice was closing in on the Sicknick murder. Sicknick is the officer that was assaulted, sprayed with bear mace, and then died the next day. These certainly look like the two guys who are recorded on video. You've probably seen saying, "Give me that bear shit." That's these fellas.
Yeah. And look, we've talked about how the first wave of indictments that came out were pretty thin. I have read the Cater and Tanios charging documents, and these are serious felony charges. So 18 U.S.C. 111B makes it a federal crime to assault a federal officer with a deadly or dangerous weapon. Okay, and bear mace clearly applies, right, under the statute. That's punishable by up to 20 years in prison. And the base offense level is at least 16. So that means, yeah.
So this isn't one of those Manafort, up to 5 years, but base level is 0 to 6 months.
Yeah, that is correct. This means real jail time, no matter whether these two are first-time offenders or not. And look, part of the complication here is that, and you, I think, sort of correctly parsed that out in your intro statement. Sicknick died the next day. We're still waiting on reports from medical experts as to whether that was directly caused by the chemicals that Cater and Tanios allegedly used. We don't know. We do not have a medical expert opinion that draws a direct line. We're still waiting on that. But don't forget, there were 2 other officers Edwards and Chapman, who were also assaulted with bear mace. Now, they survived. They were temporarily blinded. They have suffered, in some cases, what appear to be permanent lasting injuries, including scabbing under the eyes. The 2 officers said this is whatever was sprayed on them was as vicious as any chemical materials that they've used or been exposed to. So there are 3 18 U.S.C. 111 counts, right? One for each of the 3 officers. Plus, there is the conspiracy to injure an officer under 18 U.S.C. 372. That arises out of the, hey, give me that bear shit, right? Like you planned to take potentially dangerous stuff, and then you said, hey, give it to me, and started spraying. So that's another felony. Plus there are the usual obstructing an official proceeding, violent entry upon the Capitol grounds, all of those. And again, the DOJ might not be done with these 2 yet.
Right, because if medical professionals find a connection between the death of Officer Sicknick and the bear spray, we could be looking at murder, manslaughter style charges, right? And another question for you to unpack here is, if there were 3 officers assaulted with a deadly or dangerous weapon, is that 3 times 20 years?
So the way in which you operate, the way in which you calculate an offense level in the federal sentencing guidelines is kind of complicated. You don't just, if you have one that's a 16 and one that's a 14, you don't just add them together and get a 30. There's a sort of a complicated formula for how you aggregate when you're charged with multiple offenses. It will not aggregate the top line statutory maximum. So you won't get to more than 20 years on this particular offense.
No matter how many officers you assault.
No matter how many of those. But the combination of the assault, if it were to take you into the level of the table, right? That's the difference between offense level 42 and offense level 43, right? 43 is the bottom line. That is life imprisonment, right? And 42 is 360 months to life imprisonment. And so you absolutely could. At 360 months, obviously that's 30 years. The way in which you get to you get higher up the table is by aggregating together more counts and more aggravation. And I will tell you, if the calculation begins as a homicide, right?
So if a medical professional finds a link between sickness, death, and this bear spray.
Yep, that is exactly right. So assume then that would begin as being treated for purposes of the sentencing guideline as either a second-degree murder or a conspiracy to commit murder charge, right?
Right, because of the give me the bear shit.
Yep. Then those base offense levels begin at 33 and 38 respectively. And I will tell you, it does not take much, right? The aggravation to get from there to 42 or 43 it would almost certainly be met in this case. So yeah, the lawyers for Cater and Tanios, I think, have an awfully big incentive to try and pursue some kind of plea deal right now.
Yes.
It's not going to get better.
And quickly. And this is different from what we saw on Zip Tie Guy, right? Oh,
yeah. So look, in addition to what we just talked about with respect to starting off at a high offense level, the evidence in the affidavit is really, really strong, right? Like this, you can search it out and find it. We'll link it in the show notes. Part of what was possible on Zip Tie Guy is that the sentencing guidelines have 4 separate zones, right? And those zones control whether you get prison only, that's zone D, whether you can get the split sentence, right, half incarceration, then half supervised relief or release or home detention, zone B, whether you can get probation, or zone A, the Papadopoulos zone, where you get probation only, no confinement, but sort of 6 months of probation. Every single one of these starts in zone D. There's no chance of getting below that level, even if these are first-time offenders. So
interesting. Okay. Wow. And finally, something else interesting here. Department of Justice, through Acting Assistant Attorney General Brian Boynton. That's the job to which Vanita Gupta is nominated. You mentioned that earlier. We're going to be talking to Adam Fernandez about the nomination and confirmation hearing of Vanita Gupta a little bit later in the show. The DOJ has just filed a brief in a case called Alabama Association of Realtors v. Department of Health and Human Services in connection with the CDC's moratorium on residential evictions. So tell us what this is about.
Yeah. So as you sort of went over in the A segment, right? The CDC, it hasn't been all bad. But some of their rulings, some of their recommendations have been scaled back. One of the things that they've done that has very clearly helped manage the COVID-19 crisis is in September of 2020, the CDC, acting under in my mind, what is clearly delegated congressional authority, directed a nationwide moratorium on residential evictions. Okay, so their order says a landlord or residential property owner cannot evict a tenant for non-payment of rent. Right now, that does not forgive the rental obligation, right? That just continues to accrue. But it says you can't kick them out of the property right now, which, makes a lot of sense. To receive those protections, the tenant has to file an affidavit. They have to assert 7 different things, that their income is below a certain level, that they've applied for federal rent relief, right? They've got to do certain things. And that order, but if the tenant does that, then they can't be kicked out of their apartment or rental property. Set to expire on December 31st. Got extended of 2020, got extended to March 31st of this year, will probably get extended again before it expires, right? I would assume. And a bunch of landlord organizations have sued to try and block this order, as you might imagine, right? But most of them have lost. But there was a case that got a lot of attention last week called Skyworks versus CDC. It was in the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of Ohio. The judge there was J. Philip Calabrese, who was a Trump appointee, Federalist Society guy. And he ruled that the CDC lacked the authority to issue that moratorium in the first place, and so that it was invalid.
Okay.
But interestingly, he did not issue an injunction in that case. He issued declaratory relief. Okay. And so what the significance of that is, that means the Skyworks plaintiffs, right, those landlords get the right to go evict their particular tenants in the Northern District of Ohio, or at least until an appellate court steps in and enjoins Calabrese's order, which I expect may happen, right? But nobody else does, right? Not even if you are in a neighboring district, right? If you're in the Eastern District of Ohio, that order does not apply to you. And a fellow judge is sort of free to say, we think they got that one wrong over there in the Northern District, right? And that's essentially what's happened, right? So on Friday, the DOJ weighed in on your Alabama Association case. And they said, because the plaintiffs in that case, the Alabama Association of Realtors and various other landlords said, look, we are appealing to this court that says, hey, look, you should know this case came out last week and you should take notice of this authority. And the DOJ responded to that notice of additional authority and was like, yeah, look, the Skyworks case, that's just a single judge and he's wrong. Right. So, yeah. And so I think there are really 2 important takeaways here. Right. The first, as I'd explained, there is no injunction. There was certainly no nationwide injunction. So unless you live in Ohio, right, you are still covered, assuming you've otherwise qualified for relief, you are covered until the end of March by the existing CDC anti-eviction order. And again, you have to have filed that affidavit. Don't take legal advice from a podcast, right? I'm not your lawyer here. But it does not, right, descriptively, that doesn't apply anywhere else. And number 2, that the DOJ intends to defend that moratorium everywhere else while that Skyworks case is litigated. So, that's going to help prevent people from getting kicked out of their apartment.
Well, that's good to hear. Yeah, and I wonder if CDC will extend that moratorium here in the next couple of weeks. We'll stay on top of it for you and let you know that. Yep. I'm assuming it would be them. It would be Dr. Rochelle Walensky that would do that.
Yeah, that's right. And look, the CDC is authorized very, very broadly. It's 42 U.S.C. 264, and it says they are authorized by Congress to make and enforce such regulations as in its judgment are necessary to prevent the introduction, transmission, or spread of communicable diseases from one state or possession into any other state or possession.
That'll do
and
it.
Certainly, like kicking a whole bunch of people out of their apartments, seems like that would be within their purview. So
Yeah. Oh, 100%.
Yep.
I would think so. And it's really interesting. Do you think the judge didn't issue an injunction because he's dumb?
So I don't think so, right? Like did
he just forget or
no? He considered whether to issue injunctive relief in the Skyworks case, but said, I think that the appropriate resolution here to these plaintiffs is declaratory judgment, right? Is to say, I think in order to resolve the actual controversy within this jurisdiction, I am going to declare that these plaintiffs have the right to evict their non-paying tenants. And I don't want to wade into, a national debate. And look, like, whether that is a recognition that, a tacit recognition that his reading of the Administrative Procedure Act and the statute that I just read to you is probably not tenable. I don't want to say. Judge Calabrese is not. He's a smart guy. He's just a right wing guy.
Well, we'll keep everybody posted on that. And right after this break, Andrew, you and I get to talk to Adam Fernandez. He's from Lawyers for Good Government. We're going to discuss the Vanita Gupta confirmation hearing and some of the other, essential functions of the civil rights unit at the Department of Justice. And it's good. It's an absolutely incredible conversation. I hope you'll stick around for it. So stay with us. Hey everybody, it's AG. Thanks for listening to Clean Up on Aisle 45. This episode is brought to you by Policy Genius. It's March already. Spring has sprung. It's time for some spring cleaning and getting the house in order. And you can also get a head start by revisiting your home and auto insurance with Policy Genius. Policy Genius can help you set two birds free with one key. You can compare home and auto insurance rates and save up to $1,055 per year by reshopping. That is money you can put towards things you really care about. So, first of all, you head to policygenius.com. You answer a few quick questions about yourself and your property. Then, Policy Genius will take it from there. They'll compare rates to 30 top insurers from Progressive to Nationwide and find you the lowest quotes. The Policy Genius team will look at all the ways to maximize your savings too, including bundling your home and auto policies. If Policy Genius finds a better rate than what you're paying now, they'll switch you over for free. It's no wonder that with that level of service, Policy Genius has earned a 5-star rating across over 1,600 reviews on Trustpilot and Google. And if you're worried that this year is flying by and you've barely gotten anything done, take a deep breath. Policy Genius will help you make the most of this month in minutes. Just reshop your home and auto insurance, and you could save up to $1,055. Head to policygenius.com to get started right now. Policy Genius. When it comes to insurance, it's nice to get it right. Hey, everybody. Welcome back. Today, we are lucky to be joined by Adam Fernandez. He's the Vice President of Policy and Strategic Engagement at Lawyers for Good Government, and we're going to discuss the nomination of Vanita Gupta to the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice. Adam, welcome.
Yeah, thanks again for having me, AG. Andrew, great to finally meet you.
Likewise.
So let's talk a little bit before we get into the hearing of Vanita Gupta that actually took place this past week. Tell us a little bit about some of the obstacles that we've faced in seating a person to head the Criminal Rights Division at the Department of Justice, if you wouldn't mind.
Of course. Yeah. So I'm a civil rights attorney who's worked on nominations in D.C. Over the past decade. I knew the attacks against Vanita Gupta were going to be disingenuous and gross, because frankly, they always are against nominees of color, and especially those that devote their lives to civil rights and to ensuring people from marginalized communities have equal access to justice. On the Daily Beans a few weeks ago, and I recommend listening to that one too, I mentioned how back in the 1960s, you could nominate the lead civil rights lawyer in the U.S., Thurgood Marshall, to the Supreme Court and get him confirmed. But these days, most recently in the Obama administration, you try nominating a civil rights leader to a position of the Department of Justice, and it opens the floodgates to some really vicious attacks. I personally think we can solve a lot of Americans' problems if we can get back to where we were in the 1960s and normalize getting Thurgood Marshall's successors, like Vanita Gupta and Kristen Clarke, into the administration and onto the courts.
Yeah, and the weird thing, too, is that, if we had nominated an old white guy to lead the Civil Rights Division, there would be a lot of pushback for that, too. So it's just sort of this double-edged sword if you're a Democrat nominating someone to sit at civil rights in the Department of Justice, because you're either going to get pushed back because it's an old white guy, or you're going to get pushed back, rightfully so, by the way, or you're going to get pushed back because of who it is. Because the Republicans are just the way that they are.
Right, because at the end of the day, like the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice, their job is to enforce things like, voting rights laws. And it's so important that we have people who are experienced to do this kind of work, like Vanita Gupta and Kristen Clarke, regardless of their race and ethnicity. You need people who've devoted their lives to voting rights to lead the Civil Rights Division at the Department of Justice.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I guess we got kind of a peek as to how this is going to go. Beginning last Tuesday, Vanita Gupta had her hearing before the Senate Judiciary Committee. This is after Gary Severino's Judicial Action Watch, smear group has been portraying her as, radical Antifa terrorist. What did you see in that hearing? What are sort of your top line thoughts from what we saw last week?
So, yeah, I mean, I honestly saw racism and sexism on full display at Vanita Gupta's hearing. So the hearing also included Lisa Monaco, national security expert, to be the number 2 at the Department of Justice. And Vanita Gupta was nominated to be the number 3 at the Department of Justice. But if you didn't know that going in and you watched it, you'd think that Gupta was nominated to the senior position because she received the vast majority of the questions. And although her answers were pretty darn similar to Garland's and Monaco's, they kept asking Gupta the same questions over and over again. She was interrupted like at least 15 times. They used overtly sexist language like salacious to describe her work advocating for marginalized communities. But it's not just the gross things that they said, it's who's saying them and why. So take, for example, Cornyn, who as Texas Attorney General gave a Lawman of the Year award to Tom Coleman, corrupt cop who framed predominantly Black, but also white and Latina Texans for crimes they didn't commit. Gupta, working at Thurgood Marshall's NAACP Legal Defense and Educational Fund, succeeded in getting 38 of them free. And the corrupt cop was later convicted of perjury. So some people believe that matters in the world of law is all that matters is getting convictions, and they don't particularly care if police work ranges from shoddy to downright criminal, like it was in Tilia.
Wait, so a criminal attorney general did criminally things? That's really interesting because Attorney General Paxton is under indictment himself, isn't he?
Indeed, he is. But it's not just like I don't want to say I don't have any evidence that Cornyn did any of this on purpose. But I do want to say that he fostered an environment that allowed testimony from one crooked cop alone to be the sole basis of 38 convictions that were later overturned.
Well, tell us what you mean by fostering that environment.
So he gave the the corrupt cop a Lawman of the Year award, and whereas Gupta, looked into what something that had a racially disproportionate impact, and saw that there was some literal perjury involved. The cop ended up getting convicted of perjury, and she managed to get pardons from the Republican conservative governor of Texas for those 38 people who were victims of the crime. So
we should underscore just how amazing both halves of that are, right? Like it is incredibly rare for a prosecutor to bring perjury charges against anybody after subsequent testimony, let alone a cop. And those may be the only, pardons secured by anybody in Texas, in the past 2 decades. So that's pretty amazing stuff.
Yeah.
And it sounds to me like the heart and soul of what an experienced and skilled person would be doing at the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice. I mean, that's kind of the bread and butter, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And there, another thing that's bread and butter of the Department of Justice, especially the Civil Rights Division, is voting rights. Like, frankly, like as we mentioned in the beginning, like there's a reason why some of these attacks are so vile and disgusting. It's because they don't want to come out and say that the reason they don't want them is they don't want these experienced voting rights leaders running the Department of Justice. One of the very few things I'll miss about Trump is how he always managed to say the quiet part out loud. He said that Republicans would never be elected again if it were easier for people of color to vote.
Yeah.
Now, I personally don't think that's true, but like they just have to change their platform.
Thomas Hofeller had a hard drive that was labeled that. I mean, you know,
we had somebody this week named Kavanaugh, not the Supreme Court justice, but somebody named Kavanaugh actually said in a court filing, not everyone should vote. Not everyone should be allowed to vote. I'm paraphrasing, but that's pretty much kind of word for word there. So yeah, quiet part out loud. And what do we have? Over 250 now lawsuits across the country, 13 in Arizona alone, like trying to disenfranchise voters of color. And so it's clear to me from the side that decries cancel culture that they want to cancel the votes of people of color in this country and disenfranchised communities for obvious reasons. And you brought up the Hofeller files, which just flat out said, here's ways we can draw lines to disenfranchise, to help white Republicans. And so it's, I mean, it seems so clear to me, but I just don't understand how Republicans can't see it, or Republican voters can't see that that's what's happening.
Yeah. At the end of the day, I do believe that, it's in everyone's best interest to have easy access to the vote for everyone. I think it's wrong that Republicans can't be elected if everyone has easy access to the vote. I think, the way that the election in 2020 did with expanded mail-in ballots, like that, it's hard to say that any one party was advantaged by that. And as a principle, the two of the most experienced voting rights attorneys in the country are Vanita Gupta and Kristen Clarke. And that's exactly why we need them in the Department of Justice. And exactly why, because Republicans think like this fallacy that they can't get elected without these voting rights infringements. That's why they are working so hard against both Vanita Gupta and Kristen Clarke.
Well, I've seen what look like three arguments that are being advanced against Vanita Gupta, and I'm curious your evaluation. You could talk about the merits or lack thereof, but also sort of, whether these blows are landing, right? And those three arguments, and this appears to be it, right, seem to be number one, that she said some mean things on Twitter, which, clearly these folks have not hung around all of our respective Twitter feeds. Number two, that she wrote in an op-ed about a decade ago that drugs ought to be decriminalized, which, I think I'm probably in more agreement with that op-ed than her subsequent testimony. But and then third, her position sort of, and this doesn't appear to be grounded in any actual prior documents, but apparently she's a secret Antifa sleeper cell agent who wants to defund the police, which again, sort of led to the testimony. And we could talk about, if we have the time, like is she in the risk of, alienating some of her supporters on the left with, kind of marshaling together the support of pretty much every major, police law enforcement agency, the Fraternal Order of Police, and so some groups that, I don't know that I would want to have their seal of approval on mine. But I fed you a lot. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. So I listened to that entire hearing, and I kept waiting for them to tell us what the mean things she said on Twitter they're talking about. This is in part because, I too have a decent Twitter presence. I know the two of you have decent Twitter presences. I have followed Vanita's Twitter feed pretty darn closely over the years. And I try to maintain a lawyerly persona on Twitter. And frankly, I thought she did too. So
yeah, I do not.
Yeah.
I could never go through one of these confirmation hearings. If they thought Vanita Gupta and Neera Tanden were mean on Twitter, I'll never get there.
Yeah. So one of the few things that they brought up was that, she said something that I considered rather mild, saying that, Brett Kavanaugh shouldn't be confirmed. And I was like, did you listen to Kavanaugh's hearing? He promised to bring the fire of God down on Democrats who he felt that had betrayed him. These are not it's right to be mildly upset that Kavanaugh is going through, and I don't see it. And if, telling what I consider to be the truth on Twitter is an attack, then, oh boy, we've got some serious problems getting anyone confirmed. But yeah, long story short, I think that's a very disingenuous attack that they're using because Neera Tanden's nomination failed, nominally because of the issue of tweets.
Yeah, and oh no, let me unclutch my pearls that someone thought Kavanaugh shouldn't be on the Supreme Court. Before we get out of here, I wanted to go back to voting rights for just a second, because you touched on something very important, and how this also hurts Republican voters. This limiting the access to the ballot box. Because I was watching Braveheart the other night, which I've seen a lot, and there's this part where they're having a battle, and King Longshanks goes, "Archers," and the guy goes, "Won't we hit our own troops?" And he goes, "Yes, but we'll hit theirs as well." And that's sort of popped into my head what's going on with these bills to disenfranchise voters, because I was talking to Adrian Fontes, who worked on Arizona elections, and he was saying, hey, we've had a robust vote by mail system for a long time that benefited Republicans. It benefited all the retirees in Arizona voted by mail, who also don't have driver's licenses because they're retirees. They just don't go out to get drivers because they don't drive anymore, and so requiring ID and making people jump through all these hoops is going to disenfranchise Republican voters as well. It's unhealthy for the democracy to limit access to the ballot box. Now, I mean, obviously there's a long history of specifically targeting certain communities, but I can't get my head around the fact that Republicans are now anti-democracy, and even saying it out loud. Mike Lee saying rank democracy is the enemy of liberty, or whatever the hell. Just absolutely stunning, blows my mind, and it's going to make do you remember in the 2020 election where people were like, stop attacking vote by mail? We have so many Republicans who do that. It's pretty incredible. But they, I think their whole goal is, well, we'll hit theirs as well. And that's just sort of the best excuse I can come up with. So
one of the many deceptive things that was said in that hearing, which I think is underline what you just said, AG. It's that, working in civil rights, as a civil rights attorney, I can say that the purpose of civil rights law is to ensure that everyone, regardless of their background, has equal access to the law, equal access to justice, equal access to the vote. It's not about putting one group ahead of another. It's ensuring that every group has a fair shake. And both Vanita Gupta and Kristen Clarke, whose hearing will be upcoming within the next few weeks. So I'm trying to make sure that we're very clear on that as well. Both of them are real experts in this. Kristen Clarke, in particular, leads the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law. They do an awful lot, but they're probably best known for their 866 Our Vote program that organizes attorneys to protect the right to the vote in all 50 states. I've testified before with Kristen, but I'm most proud of Lawyers for Good Government's partnership with the Lawyers Committee to help get them volunteer attorneys. And like at the end of the day, cleaning up after Trump, there's nothing more important than ensuring access to the vote. And Vanita Gupta and Kristen Clarke, they are the best candidates to work for the Department of Justice. And anyone who says otherwise just doesn't believe in the right to vote.
Wow, that is incredibly well said. Let me ask if you're willing to go out on the limb. What do you think the result is going to be in the Judiciary Committee, and do you think that that first Vanita Gupta and then Kristen Clarke are going to be confirmed by the full Senate? Is it going to be moderately bipartisan? Is it going to be a pretty narrow vote? What's your gut telling you?
I mean, I try not to predict the future ever since Donald Trump got elected.
I have a sub 100 batting average.
Yeah.
So I feel you.
I called the 70-30 for Merrick Garland.
You called that number for number. It was pretty amazing. Yeah.
But that aside, I think that the thing that's most important is for your listeners to know that they have the power to affect how this ends up. Frankly, every single senator needs to hear that your listeners support civil rights leaders like Vanita Gupta and Kristen Clarke for positions at DOJ, and that they support them for other positions in the administration and the courts. It's basically the same message of whether your senator is Republican or Democrat, because at the end of the day, senators also play an important role in who gets nominated to the courts in their state, and they need to hear that you want civil rights leaders like Thurgood Marshall on the courts again, and in the administration again. So call your senators, and if you'd like, you can still join our Lawyers for Good Government's sign-on letter supporting Gupta and Clarke. And thanks again for having me.
And is that still your pinned tweet, Adam? At Adam AESQ? Is that still your pinned tweet to sign on to that letter to support?
Absolutely. And it will continue to be my pinned tweet, or a link to that will continue to be my pinned tweet until they are both confirmed. And to your question, Andrew, I am confident that if we all, get out there, that they will both be confirmed, and we'll have a lot more like them in the coming weeks and months.
I wanted to underscore what a fantastic piece of advice I think that is, and I just want to emphasize, as you've said it, call on the phone. Do not send an email. Do not tweet at your senators. They want to hear from constituents over the phone. I know that might seem archaic for a lot of you, but it makes a real difference. Adam, thank you so much.
Some of those senators are pretty archaic, so you gotta call on the phone. The landline.
It just does.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. VP of Policy and Strategic Engagement at Lawyers for Good Government. Also, Adam A. Esquire, ESQ, on Twitter. Thank you very much. Adam Fernandez. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Keep up the great work, man.
Thanks.
Hey, all. It's AG, and this segment of Cleanup on Aisle 45 is brought to you by my favorite thing ever. It's called Magic Spoon cereal. It's so delicious, you will not believe it's also healthy. I have been a huge cereal fan since a child. Used to plop down in front of Saturday morning cartoons and watch them all and eat my cereal and then drink the delicious milk afterwards. I loved it. But as an adult, I had to give it up because of all the sugar and carbs and chemicals. That is where Magic Spoon has saved the day. It's delicious. You seriously won't believe it's made without all the sugar, carbs, or guilt. And as Forbes magazine says, with cereal that tastes this good, made without all the sugar, And having so much nutritional value as opposed to none, Magic Spoon is probably the future of breakfast. Magic Spoon cereals amazingly have 0 sugar, 12 grams of protein, and only 3 net grams of carbs in each serving. It's keto-friendly, gluten-free, grain-free, soy-free, low-carb, high-protein, and GMO-free, and the best part, it is really, really delicious, you guys. With 4 amazing flavors, vintage style. They've got cocoa, fruity, frosted, and blueberry. It tastes incredible. It seems too good to be true, but it is not. My favorite flavor right now is cocoa. It is yummy and chocolatey, and it gives you that yummy chocolatey milk afterwards that you can drink. You can snack on it dry, have it as a dessert. It's really amazing. Go to magicspoon.com/cleanup. Grab a variety pack, try all 4 flavors today, and be sure you use promo code CLEANUP at checkout to get free shipping. Magic Spoon is so confident in their product, it's backed with a 100% happiness guarantee. So if you don't like it for any reason, they will refund your money. And with free shipping, it's totally risk-free. That's magicspoon.com/cleanup and use the code CLEANUP for the free shipping. And we thank Magic Spoon for sponsoring the podcast. Everybody, welcome back. It's the moment you've all been waiting for. It's time to say goodbye to you. Well, we're going to begin with someone who isn't a Trump appointee, but we couldn't resist wishing a heartfelt goodbye to you to Piers Morgan, who pouted his way, if you could possibly move by pouting. He pouted his way off of the set of Good Morning Britain after co-host Alex Beresford called out Morgan for his unhinged, nonstop rants about Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex, who once had the audacity and good taste to ghost him, to turn him down for a second date.
Yeah. You should be Duchess of something, AG.
Oh, yes.
Maybe not Sussex, but, somewhere.
Duchess of Justice.
Duchess of Justice. That's outstanding. But seriously, look, I never knew that Morgan had gone out with Meghan Markle on, I guess one date that, apparently went real well.
According to him, they had a drink and he put her in a cab and then she went to a party where she met Harry and then never spoke to him again. Okay. I didn't know that either, Andrew. I was like, why does he hate Meghan Markle? Oh.
Yeah, and look, not disclosing when you're a news anchor, commentator, person like us, right? Not disclosing that you're doing a hit piece on a woman you tried to date is a massive conflict of interest, right? If I used to sleep with Bill Barr, I have an ethical obligation to disclose that to you. I have not, so disclose that. But yeah, so here's what Beresford said, and I just love this, right? She's my new hero. She said, look, in that fantastic accent of hers that I will not attempt to emulate. I understand that you don't like Meghan Markle. You've made it so clear a number of times on this program. And I understand you've got a personal relationship with her or had one and she cut you off. She's entitled to cut you off if she wants to. Has she said anything about you since she cut you off? I don't think she has, but yet you continue to trash her.
Yeah, he was great.
Yeah.
And just... He was so mad. I was like, I'm out of here. And he just gets up and walks out.
Yep.
Even without his ethical lapses, Piers Morgan has been super shitty for a very long time.
Oh, yeah.
In 2014, Morgan interviewed trans activist Janet Mock with a chyron that said Janet Mock was a boy until age 18. Misgendered her on air. And tweeted out, and this is just gross. I hate to even read this, but he said, quote, "How would you feel if you found out the woman you were dating was formerly a man?" When Mock called him out for it, he blamed her for failing to appreciate how he was highlighting, quote, her inspiring story.
Yeah. And look, Piers Morgan has slut-shamed a ton of women in his far too long career, from Kim Kardashian to Susan Sarandon, if you remember. And look, and every single time he gets called out for being a sexist jerk, he uses the Rush Limbaugh epithet feminazi. You can Google it on his Twitter feed if you don't want to maintain a healthy relationship with the lunch you ate a couple of hours ago. It's just adult human beings who aren't monsters should not use the epithet feminazi. And adult human beings should maybe shut the hell up about stuff that doesn't concern you, like, Susan Sarandon's cleavage.
Yeah, and you could sort of hear it in his description, because, after this, people went and found the little interview where he talked about how he had a date with her. You could just hear it was just dripping with misogyny, right? Like, we had a drink, she was drinking, she's drinking, mentioned that a few times, she was drinking. I put her in a cab, I put her in a cab, because she's, incapable of getting her own cab, and clearly just a drunk slut, right? Ready to go out, and then went to another party, because she's a heathen whore, and then met Harry there. It's just like, just stop. It's gross. So guess what, Piers? Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. And this isn't quite as high profile a story, but the exodus of Trump-appointed U.S. attorneys continues.
Woo-hoo.
Right? This week we bid goodbye to Seth Ducharme.
No, Ducharme. It's Ducharme.
I didn't want to be accused of saying that he's got a Ducharme. So anyway, I do know that he is one of Bill Barr's hatchet men, who was then made, acting U.S. attorney for the Eastern District of New York. That is, that's the district that includes Brooklyn, Queens, Staten Island, part of Long Island. I'm just going through this. Yeah.
Wait. I mean, I am a douchebag. Here is my handle. Here is my spout. Yeah. This is all I can see when I think of Seth.
Oh God. Yeah. He's the worst, and he's gone. Well, we have, when this show airs, we will have 2 more days to deal with Mr. Ducharme. He resigns effective March 19th, allowing Mark Lesko, just long-standing Democrat, former director of Accelerate Long Island, which was designed to bring venture capital to Long Island firms, to become acting U.S. attorney for the Eastern District. So goodbye to you.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. And with the exodus of Trumpers, we have some incoming appointees, including Andrea T. Martinez, who becomes the acting U.S. attorney for the District of Utah. Under the Federal Vacancies Reform Act, she becomes the first Latina to hold the position, and she'll stay in office until a permanent Biden nominee is confirmed by the Senate. So...
Yeah.
Not bye-bye.
Yeah, hello.
And
you
also...
say goodbye.
I say hello. And we also welcome Lisa G. Johnston, acting U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of West Virginia. This isn't a Federal Vacancies Reform Act appointment. She's a career prosecutor who moved up through the ranks. And thanks to the departure of Trumper Mike Stewart, she is now the acting U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of West Virginia.
Yeah. So goodbye to that dude, and good luck to Johnston.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And as we mentioned at the top of the show, welcome Deb Haaland.
Absolutely.
She has been confirmed as the Secretary of the Interior. Just tears of joy. 51-40 was the vote. And several Republicans voted for her. So I don't know where everybody was today.
Yeah, I saw that news break right as we went to record, but I do not know. It's a Monday and folks are taking a long weekend. I don't know.
Yeah, rain. I don't know. I honestly don't know. But we will have more comings and goings and bye-byes and hellos next week on Cleanup on Aisle 45. This has been awesome. Thanks again to Adam Fernandez. You can follow him at AdamAESQ on Twitter, and you can follow me at Allison Gill or at Muller She Wrote or at Daily Beans Pod. Those are really the only 3.
Yep. Look for me at OpenArgs or at PA Torres Law, but really follow the Opening Arguments Twitter. Follow our own Cleanup on Aisle 45 Twitter. That is at Aisle 45 Pod. And boy, that's I think the 11 or so different ways that you can get in touch with us. We're not hard to find. We're accessible folks.
And next Tuesday, you can find us on the Stereo app live at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 Eastern. Now, by then, we'll all be caught up on our lost hour. God, I hope they cancel Daylight Saving Time. I hope they cancel Daylight Savings Time. But I would like to say bye-bye to Daylight Saving Time. Now, I know that there's a lot of senators that want to make Daylight Saving Time permanent, but that's bad. We should make standard time permanent, and we should talk about maybe reorganizing a little bit of the northern states into different time zones to make up for the fact that they already have sun until 10 at night. So, but just it's dumb. It's old. It's time for it to go. It's time for it to say bye-bye. I hope that's Beans bye-bye for me.
I'm with you on that.
All right. Well, anything before we get out of here, Andrew, other than just another huge thanks to our patrons, and we really appreciate. We couldn't do this show without you. Seriously.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks again to Adam Fernandez. What a great interview.
Yeah, he's a great guy. And check out Lawyers for Good Government. Everybody, until next week. This has been Cleanup on Aisle 45. Cleanup on Aisle 45 is written and produced by Allison Gill and Andrew Torres and is engineered and edited by Mackenzie Mazzell and Starburns Audio. Fact-checking and research by Allison Gill and Andrew Torres with quality assurance and media by Muller She Wrote LLC. Branding design and logo by Starburns Audio and Joel Reeder with Moxie Design Studios. And our copy is written by Jesse Egan. Our music is written and recorded by Adam Orr and Christopher Hoffey, and our opening sequence was designed by Allison Gill and mixed by Mackenzie Mazzell and Starburns Audio. Follow us on Twitter at Aisle45Pod and listen wherever you get your podcasts. Don't miss our Cleanup on Aisle 45 after party over on the Stereo app. We'll be going live every Tuesday at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 Eastern, and we want to hear from you. Our first stereo show went a little bit like this.
These big corporations are donating money to politicians that are trying to suppress the vote. And that public pressure got them to come out and go, we oppose this, right? So your voice does matter. People just like you have made a difference. And I love, you're going to hear this on tomorrow's cleanup, but Allison has a spectacular analogy that I'm not going to spoil on tonight's Q&A, involving the fact that these Republican efforts target Republicans as well, right? And so it's so good, and I don't want to spoil it. But their thought process is, we don't care if we wind up suppressing some Republican votes because we're suppressing more Democratic votes, and that gives you an opportunity to build coalitions with people who care about having their voices. Can you build a coalition with Uncle Frank? No, you can't. But there are a lot of working class pro-Trump people who are like, yeah, you know what? I'd kind of like to be able to vote on the weekend because, I work second shift, and otherwise, like, voting in person on a Tuesday sucks, right?
Yeah.
Lots of opportunities like that. So I hear you. Don't put aside the despair and focus on the positive. And hopefully we've given you some concrete options there.
Stereo app is live social conversations, and they're awesome, and we want to talk directly with you, our listeners. So you can join our show, ask questions about news, politics, or anything, and you can share your experiences and opinions. We want to hear it all. So download now and join us live this week. Link to our show in the description, and join us over on the Stereo app.
Hi, I'm Harry Littman, host of Talking Feds, a roundtable that brings together prominent figures from government law and journalism for a dynamic discussion of the most important topics of the day. Each Monday, I'm joined by a slate of Feds favorites and new voices to break down the headlines and give the insider's view of what's going on in Washington and beyond. Plus sidebars explaining important legal concepts read by your favorite celebrities. Find Talking Feds wherever you get your podcasts.